There we go. Yeah. Okay, welcome to tonight's live stream, Truth Proof live stream from Truth Proof Towers. Now, we've got a great guest on tonight. He's a last minute guest and he replaces the guest with unforeseen circumstances, couldn't make it tonight. So, a big thank you to the guest for tonight. So, first of all, I've got to say, Deborah's doing the moderating tonight. Welcome to the show, Debs. And if I look now onto the chat and see who's in the chat, we've got Umbra Man, Corey, we've got Tony Worrell, Professor McLean. Let's have a look who's on. Joe Weeks is in the chat. Thank you, Joe, for joining the show. We have Lisa Odd, nickname, David K. And that's about all I can say. If I've missed your name out, I apologise. You're a great crowd in here, and thanks for all your support that you've been giving us in the last few weeks. Now, I don't know if this microphone's in sync or not, but I'm sure you guys will tell me if it isn't. But you won't be hearing no more from me. Roll the intro. There we have it. We start the show officially from now. I've got to welcome Paul and his guest. Welcome, you guys.
Thank you very much, Les. Another week come round, and here we are again. And like you say, tonight we've got a replacement guest, but really looking forward to him. He's been on before, Craig Bryant. Welcome, Craig.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me back on.
You're welcome. And as I know, last time I think people will remember that you talked about the Shadow Man of Accrington. So as you pointed out earlier, we're on a similar theme tonight. We're still Accrington-based research, aren't we?
We are for parts of it, yeah.
Yeah. So tell our listeners a little bit about yourself for those that have never heard you before, and then we'll get into some of these accounts and a bit of your research.
Okay. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of feedback on my mic, so I apologise for that. Yeah, okay. So I live in Lancashire. I was born and raised actually in the town of Accrington, which is in East Lancashire. I live out in a part of the county now called the Ribble Valley, so it's up on the north bit. It's quite close to the Yorkshire border, so not too far away from places like Todmorden in West Yorkshire, and I'm right on the foothills really of Pendle Hill. So a lot of stuff goes on obviously around here. Pendle Hill's famous for a lot of things, including the witch trials. I'm an author. I'm a podcaster. I have my own podcast now. I've just written my second book, which obviously we're going to have a chat about this evening. And, you know, people often ask me, are you an investigator of paranormal activity? Not in the traditional sense. I'm more of a collector of stories. I like to speak to people, talk to people, get the stories, you know, do research on, you know, legends, ghost stories, UFO sightings. I try and look into the history of places as well. I think that's really important. To get some sort of, you know, context into why things may be happening in a certain place. Done some research into ley lines, water courses, and you know, sometimes the evidence all comes together and points in one big direction. And I think that hopefully comes out in the book that I've just released.
Yeah, brilliant. And before we get to the book, which we will do, obviously that's what I want to listen to you tell us about today. But when you say you research various places and you look into history, you know, and of the locations,
yeah.
Obviously, an event, this isn't as simple as it sounds, people. An event is location based. It's got to be, hasn't it? But do you find that more events of, we'll say, high strangeness, diverse phenomena appear and happen at certain locations than others? Is that what you've discovered?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it is to do. First of all, when I think it falls into two categories really. I think there's the category of the paranormal. So you look at, ghosts and paranormal activity are often attached to buildings, but they're also often attached to places. So it might not necessarily be the building that they're attached to. It may be the ground that building is stood on, where there was previously something else. So previously, let's say, a different building that had been knocked down, and the spirit or the paranormal energy is attached to that place rather than that building. When it comes to things like UFOs and UAPs, which is something that I've really started to look into, certainly from this area where I live, a lot of it seems to be along ley lines, and certainly I've come across a theory which I've started to look into now about water and about water courses and how that can seem to intensify energy in very similar ways that people believe that ley lines do. And the geology of the land, I think, has got a lot to do with it as well. I've said this before with regards to Pendle Hill. I mean, Pendle Hill has got a massive amount of UFO activity, which we can delve into during this chat. Morecambe Bay as well, which is an area that I've researched for this book. Started off really with a couple of emails I got from a guy who lived up in Barrow in Furness, which is up on the sort of top western part of Morecambe Bay. And then I started to look into historical reports of UFOs over Morecambe Bay, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens, and they all follow the same pattern. They're all the same type of craft. And so, not only are there nuclear power stations, there's two actually. There's one at Heysham, and there's one at Sellafield, which is just around the Cumbrian coast, so just a little bit further north, but not that far as the crow flies. But also the geology of the land as well. I mean, Morecambe Bay, if anybody knows the area at all, it's about 200 square miles, I believe, of just tidal mudflats, and it's an amazing place. It is so atmospheric. And I think the geology has got a lot to do with bringing this energy in, and being a focal point for these UFOs and UAPs.
Craig, when you say they're all the same type of, your word was craft. What are the people describing?
Triangular. Yeah. I've bear with me because I've made a lot of notes because I'm obviously doing this on the hoof, but I can give you some examples. 1997, there was a triangular object which was seen over Heysham Power Station. There was a bright white and yellow light seen by a fisherman at Walney Island. He was the guy that emailed me, and he said he saw it moving across Morecambe Bay towards Heysham, which was obviously on the far shore from where he was. In 1992, there were 4 fishermen saw 5 triangles flying in formation over the bay. And then in 1995, one of those same fishermen was out with 2 other friends. Bearing in mind, there's when I'm talking about fishermen, I'm actually talking here about commercial fishermen, because not pleasure fishermen. The guy at Walney Island was a pleasure fisherman, but these are professionals. They saw 3 more triangles. Again, he said they were exactly the same as he'd seen previously. In 1995, there was a report to the local police by a father and daughter who observed a large black triangle over the bay, and it actually approached them at speed. And he said it got to within about 30 meters of them and stopped dead. And he said that his report was that they were scared because this thing was moving very quickly towards them, and then it just shot up, did the classic vertical, disappeared at speed. And there was another one in 1996. This is the most amazing one of the lot. There were a number of reports all came at the same time. There were approximately 30 triangular objects over the bay, again, all in formation. So, just doing some research and looking at the pattern of these things, there is obviously something over Morecambe Bay or something around Morecambe Bay that's bringing these objects in. I think they may well be keeping an eye on the nuclear power station at Heysham. who knows?
What's your views then, Craig, on what they are? And I don't mean, I expect you to tell me what they are, but are they ours or are they from somewhere else?
Well, I mean, they could be ours. I mean, obviously, the American Air Force used to they used to have didn't they used to call it the flying wing? It was that stealth bomber back in the, maybe going back a bit far, but was the 80s and the 90s. So they could be updated versions of those. Although why there would be upwards of 30 of them out at the same time in broad daylight, you've got to ask why the military would do that.
Yeah.
So my thoughts are that they are actually something else.
Yeah.
Alien craft in effect, because of the way that they're behaving. All of the reports tend to give the same description of them defying the laws of physics. I mean, we know how these sightings go. They move very quickly. They stop on a pinhead. They turn very quickly. They shoot off vertically. They're doing things that any conventional aircraft that we know of, that the military has, wouldn't be able to do. And so I think the only conclusion you can draw from that is that they are not ours and they are not military.
And do you get reports of noise with these craft or these objects?
Occasionally, sometimes there is noise. Most of the time, they seem to be silent.
Yeah.
I've looked at there's some reports coming about objects over Pendle Hill. Now, these tend to be orbs. So again, it's strange that the pattern that they follow on that area tend to be orbs. One was described as like a ball of disco lights, which was hovering above the hill. Now, there was one report where there was a very loud humming sound. And this was two people who were down near a place called Ogden Clough Reservoir, which is actually sort of halfway up the fells going up towards Pendle. Pendle rises up to about 800 meters, something like that. No, sorry, about 600 meters. Sorry. So the sort of top couple of 100 meters sort of stands proud of the land around it, but it does rise, sort of gently, coming up to the top of Pendle. So it's all moorland around it, and there are quite a lot of reservoirs. Now, again, as I was saying, water courses. There's a major water course called Hayes Brook, which runs down from the top of Pendle, actually passes through the village where I live, and there's quite a bit of paranormal activity goes on around where this water course is, which again I can come to in a sec.
Just interested. You said over the reservoir there's one being described as humming.
Yeah.
And now I've never done this, Craig, and I'm not sure whether you have, but has anybody done any research into if these objects have been heard humming over large bodies of water? That's interesting in itself, because
it is.
I don't know what I mean, when you get power lines and you get a lot of wet weather, you can hear them buzzing, can't you? And
you can, yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, if you get too close to pylons, you can hear that buzz and that hum, can't you? Yeah. So obviously that electrical activity which is causing that noise. As far as I'm aware, no. It would be interesting to whether or not these objects, if they are near water, are making a noise. If they're seen where there isn't any water, they're not making a noise. That would be really interesting. It's obviously, I think that then that has got something to do with electrical or magnetic, power that they're giving off.
So just to stay on these angles for a moment, what's the earliest reports that you've got? Are they all 90s?
No, 1936, believe it or not, is the earliest one. And again, it was a group of 4 fishermen that were out in a boat, and it was just after they came across it. They described it as a huge piece of wood that was floating. It just appeared in front of the boat from under the water, and it came up in front of the boat and started bobbing about. They said it was about 12 foot long, almost like a ship beam.
Right.
You know, like a sailing ship beam, but it just appeared out of the water in front of the boat. So they found that quite strange. It wasn't just bobbing along on the top of the water, but almost immediately after this thing came up, they sighted this object in the sky. Again, they described it as a big black triangular aircraft, as they put it. Now, you know, going back to pre-Second World War here, there was nothing like that at all.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that actually in Morecambe Bay, because it's a tidal, because of tidal mudflats, the landscape is changing all the time. The mudflats are changing all the time. I don't know whether people know or not, but there's actually there is a Queen's Guide to Morecambe Bay. So it's actually a guy who will take people out. He's given a license by the Queen. And he will take people out on walks across the bay from one side to the other. And he is supposed to be, you know, the expert on where these channels are, where these shifting channels are. He can see just by looking at the sand where the quicksands are and everything else. Because one of the things about Morecambe Bay is it's dangerous. You know, you cannot be going across there on your own for two reasons. One, there's quicksand. And you can very easily get stuck. And secondly, the tide comes in so fast that you can very easily get cut off.
Yeah.
People have been. And it was back in the early 2000s. I don't know whether people remember, but there was...
I see it in my head now. I know what you're going to say.
A group of Chinese cockle pickers were unfortunately caught out there. And you know, I don't think they ever recovered any bodies at all.
No.
So the interesting thing is that a few years ago, they actually found, when the sands were shifting and everything, they found it was described as a stone pillar that had been worked, and it was very similar to the stone columns that you got in times like ancient Greece and Rome. So if you imagine those, you know, like the Parthenon or whatever, those pillars, and it had been worked in a very similar fashion. And they reckon it was going back way before even the Saxons had settled up, because, you know, this part of the country was there was hardly anybody here really up until sort of like the 12th or the 13th century. You know, even when they did the census after William the Conqueror came, we know that there was very, very few people living up here, because it's not great farming. The weather's terrible because it rains all the time. You know,
there's obviously been some kind of other civilization, ancient civilization there.
Yeah.
Because a stone pillar is not going to float, is it? I mean, it could move on a glacial flow or something like that. Well, no, not really, because that would predate any of that.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
Interesting in itself. And just before, I'm just labouring on these triangles because we get so many people saying that they're ours, and you've got a 1936 account. And the reason I'm doing that is because I spoke to John Hanson, I think it was late last week or early this week, and he's compiling a book on police UFO reports.
All right. He's
found a police UFO report of a flying triangle, a huge black triangle from 1908.
Yeah.
So for all these people that say they're ours,
yeah,
you know, how far back are we going to go back with this technology? And, you know, they were flying this in 19... It kind of begs the question, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was given some reports from Pendle Hill, and some of them are going back to the turn of the last century. So from the 1890s, where they're seeing, you know, bright lights in the sky, and this was pre-manned flight.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, never mind, you know, pre-Second World War. These objects were pre-manned flight. So you can't say that that the man-made, you know.
Yeah, you know, not in all instances. You know, I mean, that's not to sort of tread on people's ideas that they are man-made, but, you know, we've got to put up the argument that, you know, these things were being seen over 100 years ago as well.
That's
you
right.
know, so it's really interesting.
It is.
Obviously, we're going to talk about the Black Monks of Accrington, but I just want to go back to very start at show when you were talking about the spirits and the ghost phenomenon. Or you said, do you think why do you think they're in buildings? Are they contained in the fabric of the building, do you think? Or does the spirit have an intelligence and an attachment to the building?
Well, I think there's two types, really. I mean, you've got your classic poltergeist type of activity, which, you know, would suggest that there's an intelligence involved because of the behaviour that they tend to exhibit. And again, I'm dropping little breadcrumbs here. I'm pretty certain that there's something going on where I live at the moment.
Okay.
With regards to poltergeist activity, and it's attached.
Your home, your property. Yeah.
And it's attached to, I believe it's attached to a piano that we bought a while ago, but I'll come back to that if you want later.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think the stone tape theory is very valid. You know,
explain to people, please.
Yeah, okay. So if you've got a type of ghost, a haunting, that is repeating itself. So you may see a woman walking down a corridor, and that's all she ever does when she's seen. So she's seen walking down the same corridor all the time. So if there has been, in the past, if there's been a very emotionally traumatic event, you know, we give off electrical energy. We are basically walking batteries, aren't we? In effect, you know, we give off a lot of energy. Now, if something traumatic happens and somebody dies, passes away, you know, unexpectedly, very quickly, a shock to that person, then there is, I believe, some sort of energy which is residual, which is left behind in that place. So I'll give you an example. The first book I wrote, I did an investigation at a school. Now, this school had been built, well, probably about 14 years ago now, so it was a relatively new building. But looking at the maps from the turn of the 19th century into the 20th century, there had been back-to-back terraced houses, there'd been mills, and there'd been a church and a graveyard in this particular area. And what had happened was, when they built the school, they actually demolished the church and they exhumed a lot of the bodies and moved them to other consecrated ground. Now, back in the Victorian times, and I know this from my own family, if you were poor and you couldn't afford a gravestone, you were just putting a hole in the ground, and that was that. There was no marking to say who was there. One of the ghosts that's seen in the school, and there are numerous, and as I say, I go into this in the Shadow Man of Accrington book. There are numerous ghosts, but one of them is one of these repeating type ghosts, and it is actually a woman, but she's dressed in black. She's got a black hood up, and she actually follows. Looking at the old maps, she actually floats through the canteen of the school. But when you look at the maps, she's actually following where there was a road that went down to where the church was. The car park of the school is now over where the church used to be and the graveyard, and so she follows the line of the road down to the church, and they call her, the people who know of her in the school. She's been seen all times of the day, broad daylight, nighttime. You know, she's seen all the time. They call her the Wailing Woman because she's floating down through the canteen. She's got her hands clasped together, you know, like sort of praying or whatever, and she's crying, she's screaming, she's in absolute, you know, mental torture, anguish, really. And so, but she only, you know, there's no interaction with her. They've tried to. I talked to one guy who tried to walk in front of her and stop her, and he said she just carried on. It wasn't as if there was any intelligence there. It was just purely a replay. So it's like, I mean, you know, showing my age now. It's like a video recording. It's like a videotape.
Yeah.
It's like rewinding your skybox, you know, every for 10 seconds constantly. It's just replaying the same thing over and over again. And I think with that one, it's a classic example because she's obviously, because of the way she's behaving, she was really distraught. And that energy has somehow managed to become entrapped in that space, and it just replays itself. There's obviously some trigger, maybe because it's a school and it's a secondary school, it's a high school. You know, maybe the emotional energy of the kids or whatever is
charging that, yeah,
charging it up, yeah, and being the trigger for this manifestation. So that's the storm theory tape in effect.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I don't know lots about that, Craig, you know, but I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, I worked for a major house builder. That's what I'll say. I'm only to set name of them. And we were doing some properties in Bridlington, brand new house builds. And there were detached houses, and there were a row of terrace 6, and then a gap, and then another 6. And one in this terrace, and I better not say where it is, but I know they're still, they were having problems with it. I'm not saying I know they're still, but they were when the occupants moved in. But I remember the people working on house. I mean, I did some work in it. I never experienced anything, you know, and I used to put the chamber joists in, the doors on, you know, every part of house build that involved joinery, I would be involved in to some degree. I'd have had some participation in that property. Never experienced anything, but the ground workers did. They claimed that they were hearing voices and people talking.
Yeah.
When somebody was second fixing it, they claimed that somebody walked through the room. So, so the ghost moved another level in a brand new property. There were no properties there before, if we call it a ghost. Then nobody said a word when the occupants moved in, but they started talking about, we've got a ghost.
Yeah.
So well, the house is still there. It's going to be there for a lot of years to come. But how do we work that one out? How do we get our heads around that it's actually on a different level in property as well? But, you know, I don't know. I'm not expecting you to have an answer, Craig, but I find it fascinating.
Well, I once spoke to a lady who lived in quite an old house in a village near to Preston, and she had a little boy who was a ghost in the house, ghost of a little boy. But her daughter used to say to her, because she had a young daughter at the time, she used to say, that boy's got no legs. And what it were, level. The level was lower, so they would only see him from like the knee up, in effect. So the ground had been built up at some stage, and it was in like the sort of utility room area that she had. And she said the floor had been concreted over at one point, and like a washing machine had been put in, all that sort of stuff. But obviously the ground level had been built up, and they used to see this little boy walking through, but they could only see him from his knees up. So it's the same sort of thing,
You've got the ghost of a dog, haven't you?
I've got the ghost. Yeah. I'm sorry about that.
Don't be sorry. It's all right. So we'll jump from ghosts then, unless you've got any more to add to that. We maybe do a bit later. But shall we talk about this new book, The Monks of Accrington?
Yeah, Black Monks of Accrington. So again, this is
1 second, Craig. I'm sorry for butting in.
Yeah.
Let's just remember, and I think Deborah will have done it and Les, but anybody with any questions for Craig, please put them in capital letters and fire them at him, because we like that. It's good. Fire away, mate.
No worries. I'll try and answer anything. I probably won't know the answer, but I'll have a go. So the second, this is my second book, The Black Monks of Accrington. The genesis of this really was a story that it was when I was doing, because I mentioned I had my own podcast. I was chatting to a guy who was living in Accrington at the time, and he'd done some investigation into the police station and the courthouse. So there's a magistrates court and a police station on Manchester Road in Accrington. Now they're actually not used anymore. The grade 2 listed buildings, they were closed after the spending cuts that we've had. So everything was moved to the nearest large town, which is Blackburn. So there was a bit of investigation done, because basically there'd been the ghosts of monks had been seen in these buildings and in the area around these buildings, and on a road called Black Abbey Street. Now there's two streets in Accrington. One's called Abbey Street and one's called Black Abbey Street, hence the Black Monks of Accrington. The reason why it's called Black Abbey Street is because it was a 12th century monastery that was built. Well, monastery, a sort of smallish monastery, abbey, really, in effect, had been built by monks from Kirkstall Abbey, which, as you well know, is over Leeds way. And the area at the time, it was just, a few peasant farmers, and that was about it. And it was land that was given to the monks over at Kirkstall, so they built an abbey there. And what happened was the locals didn't like the fact that the monks were coming along and basically nicking the land off them. So they burnt the abbey down, as you do. Don't mess with Lancastrians. And unfortunately, there was at least 3 monks were reported to have died. The historical records show that 3 monks died in the blaze. So these monks have been seen in the area on a regular basis. There's also the ghost of a young girl which is seen on Black Abbey Street. Now she manifests herself. It depends really who sees her. The story goes that she, whilst the abbey was standing, she was a local farmer's girl, and she fell in love with one of the monks. So of course, this was all very, very taboo. And her brother found out about it, and he lay in wait for them. Classic love story. Lay in wait for them, killed the monk. So she, became absolutely racked with grief and died shortly afterwards. That's the legend. But it's a very, very famous ghost. She's been seen going way back, many, many years, dozens, tens, hundreds of years even. But she manifests herself in one of 2 ways. She's either, and this is interesting where the sort of folklore thing comes in, because she's probably not, there's no relation to her and the abbey burning down, but she has been seen, she will spontaneously burst into flames. So she's been reported as this, figure that's burning, or other times she's just seen sort of floating down the road. And again, there's a water course there which is interesting. The River Hyndburn runs through there, which is why the abbey was there in the first place, really. It's a natural water course, but she follows the river, and again, she's wringing her hands and crying and screaming because obviously, she's really sort of like, distraught that a boyfriend, was run through with a sword. So that's interesting. That's a really well-known sort of local legend.
Do you ever get reports? Obviously, we're staying with this the monks, but do you ever get reports of this ghost, this young lady, of just spheres of light? Because we have one here in East Yorkshire, the Danes Dyke, the White Lady of Danes Dyke.
Okay.
And they say they've seen it, but not everybody, but the people I've spoke to who claim to have seen it have seen a sphere of light.
Oh, okay.
White light, and they just perceive it as the White Lady flitting through the trees. And I just wonder sometimes if we're wanting to attribute it to a ghost. On the cliff tops, the ghost of big railings, it's a light. They're imagining it's a fisherman with a white light.
Yeah.
Do you have that, or are we seeing an actual physical, or the arms, legs, head?
As far as I'm aware, it's arms, legs, head.
Right. Okay.
So it's actually a sort of physical body.
Have you spoken to any of these people, first-hand witnesses?
Yeah. I'm going way back to when I was a kid, when I was growing up. My granddad used to tell me ghost stories all the time. It's basically how I got an interest in the paranormal in the first place. And although I haven't spoken to anybody directly who's seen it, it's just so well known. People just talk about it all the time. You can be in the Warner's pub on Warner Street in Accrington, and again, Warner Street's got a really interesting poltergeist on it. And it, people, everybody will know. You can be having a pint and just say, "Oh, what about the ghost on Black Abbey Street?" "Oh, well, my uncle saw it, and my auntie saw it." You know what I mean? So it's really well known.
The spirit, the apparition that you just spoke about. Well, let's just go to that in a moment.
Yeah.
I hope it's not going to come in questions, but I'm just looking at chat on side here, and it's not come up in capitals, but somebody's just said, can't remember the name and it's gone now, but that's not a spirit if it's bursting into flames. So
okay. Yeah. Fair enough,
well, if whoever said it in chat, and I mean this with respect, tell us what it is. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, fire away, Craig. Let's go.
Yeah, well, Warner Street is very close to Black Abbey Street. It's within a quarter of a mile. I have spoken to people who are convinced there are ley lines which run around this, along this area. As I said, there's a watercourse, which is the River Hyndburn, which actually it comes up to the surface on Black Abbey Street, but obviously it's underground. You know, it's in culverts for a lot of its course through the town. I believe it runs under Warner Street. I've had a look at some maps, some very old maps, quite difficult to get hold of, really. You know, sort of conclusive evidence.
Yeah.
But I think it probably does. It's certainly in that area. And people have been investigating, you know, ghost hunting groups have been going off and investigating Warner Street for years and years. I remember back in the 80s when I was growing up in the town, there was stuff in the paper about, you know, local paper about, you know, ghosts on Warner Street and strange things and all that. And there was looking back through the historical records, there was a murder in 1896, and a young 15-year-old lad called Christopher Hitchens. The lady that was murdered was called Sarah Coates, and Christopher Hitchens was arrested and tried for it. He'd actually found the body, but he maintained all along that when he'd found the body, there was a man had chased him out of the shop. It was a woodworking shop that he was an apprentice to a carpenter, and it was the carpenter's wife that was the victim. And he maintained that there was this very tall, thin man with as he described it, a huge mustache and a hat, and he was holding a knife that was covered in blood, and he chased him out of the shop and disappeared. And Christopher Hitchens, the lad, he maintained that, you know, it was this strange tall man that had killed Sarah Coates. Anyway, Christopher Hitchens was taken to Lancaster, to the assizes at Lancaster. And during the trial, there was an anonymous letter received from somebody who said that a few days after the murder, they'd been in a public house in Bolton, and they'd got talking to a guy who they described as tall, thin, with a large mustache and a hat, and he was very, very drunk, and he admitted the murder.
All of this is documented.
All this is documented, yeah. And then the letter then went on to say, however, the morning after, his body was found dead on the railway line. So this was put forward as evidence, and it was dismissed by the court because it was anonymous. And so Christopher Hitchin, because he was only 15, thankfully they didn't pass the death sentence on him. This was, I'll say, 1896. He actually went to Lancaster prison. Don't ask me how long he was in there for, because I couldn't find any records to show how long he was in there for, but you know, they sent him to Lancaster prison. Right. The interesting thing about this is that there was an investigation done into a shop on Warner Street, and I know the shop number, and when I looked at the 1901 census records and the 1891 census records, it was the family that was living there was the Coates family. So it's the right shop.
Yeah.
And somebody went in there to do an investigation.
Paranormal investigation,
yeah. And she said her and her husband went in. And again, I interviewed her for my podcast, actually. And her husband was physically shoved downstairs by what she perceived as, she said she picked it up as a tall, thin man with a big mustache. And they also picked up the spirit of Christopher Hitchens, and he's often been seen apparently running across the road from one shop to another, as he would have done, you know, back when this unfortunate incident happened. But this poltergeist that is seen in this shop is apparently quite violent. You know, shoves people, throws things around. But what really piqued my interest was the description. There's a tall man, thin, mustache, hat. Now, not too far away from Warner Street, literally, again, within about a quarter of a mile, is Cannon Street. And the first story in my first book was called The Shadow Man of Accrington. And I had, back in the day, back in the mid-80s, when I was working behind the bar at the Conservative Club, which was on Cannon Street, which is no longer there because it's the building's actually burnt down, unfortunately. It was victim of arson. But I saw the shadow of a tall, thin man with a hat. And it was that you know, got me interested in this story of this murder and this man and this poltergeist and everything else. I think it's the same one. I really do, because they're so close in proximity. I think it's the same entity.
If we go back to, I'm trying to remember your first talk that you did with us. Is this the shadow that came to the action?
That's right. That's exactly the one. Yeah.
But to me, Craig, and I'm not disputing you saw this because you were there, but I think I said it at the time. It implies a lot more than just some kind of residual energy or imprint, because I'm assuming that hatch wouldn't have been there all that. It's kind of hatch for serving, is it, or something? But
just a serving hatch.
Hands or its presence on the hatch and looked through.
Well, yeah, the building, the actual building itself was built in 1890. So it's around about the same time, a couple of years earlier when it was built, to when this, 6 years to when this murder took place. So it's entirely possible that this character was around at some point and you know, may well have frequented that building.
So would his presence be that strong that it could be in several different places?
Well, yeah, there have been other reports of a similar shadowy, tall, thin, shadowy figure seen in other locations in that area. If you sort of look at about, say, you know, quarter square mile or whatever, quarter mile by quarter mile, that sort of area, there have been quite a few other alleged sightings. I haven't spoken to people, but there have been alleged sightings.
And throughout the years, from when this lady lost her life, have you looked into the possibility that there's been other fatalities in area?
I have, and I didn't find anything else. That was the only one that I could find.
Yeah,
that was the only one I could find. Yeah, but Warner Street was originally there was a toll booth, toll road on it. So there's a lot of traffic going up and down. So I mean, it is possible, but I couldn't find any historical records. That was the only one that I could find.
Okay.
That would suggest that, you know, put two and two together, as it were.
So just before we leave this person or this ghost, what do you attribute the physical attribute that these spirit energies have to be able to push people? If they could push somebody, why can't they pick an hammer up or smack them in the face? Why? Because there's obviously an intelligence to it, because it's focusing its energy onto somebody, or is it just focusing energy onto energy? Do we know why? We don't know why, but do you have any idea why it's focused? Is it the fact that certain people, like your friends who were doing the paranormal investigation, are concentrating on that, and that's meeting the resistance? What do you think the reasons are?
Yeah, I think it's like opposite magnets. So when you get opposite poles of two magnets and you try and push them together, they push each other apart, don't they? So whether it's the same with some sort of electrical energy that the entity's giving off and the person's giving off, or whether it could well be magnetic energy, but it's something like, you know, positive energy and negative energy meeting each other, not fusing, pushing each other away. And I think that's why they can physically touch or push somebody, but can't do it to an inanimate object. because it's
Okay.
not giving off that same energy.
Right. Okay. So where we're going now? Are we going to concentrate on the Black Monks of Accrington, or shall we see if Les has got any questions for us?
Yeah, questions if you got any, Les?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bit of a
We've got a
pause
few.
there. Just
Yeah, we've got a few questions in, guys, and thanks for all the everybody for coming on to tonight's stream. It's been a great show up to now. Some great questions as well. So I've got one from Andy Ross, Ghost Whisperer. Has Craig investigated the Black Monk of Pontefract?
No.
Oh, that was short and sweet, Andy.
That's short and sweet, yeah.
It rings a bell, actually. Does that? I mean, Pontefract isn't. It's in West Yorkshire. I think, isn't it? Is it, Paul? West Yorkshire? Is it Pontefract?
Yeah, yes, it is. Sorry, yeah.
Where the cakes come from.
Yeah.
It rings a bell as being a well-known story, but I don't really know anything more about that. And in fact, if somebody could enlighten me on it,
It'll be one to fire at Philip Mantle. That is in Pontefract.
Yeah. I've spoken to Philip.
Everything about everything when it comes to UFOs and maybe even these monks. So we should give him a go. But thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Breaking the Clouds is asking, and I think it's a good question, how does Craig define or qualify what is a valid ley line? Is there an agreed standard?
I don't know whether there's an agreed standard or not. I know that if you research them, they tend to be linking areas where you would expect there to be high amounts of energy. So, Stonehenge, for instance, Castlereagh Stone Circle. There's an interesting one, Paul. I don't know whether you know, but there's one that runs east to west or west to east, depending on which way you're going, from the Fylde coast, and it crosses your neck of the woods just near Whitby.
Yeah.
And there's another one which runs north to south, which goes from Castlereagh Stone Circle, which is up in the Lake District. So that's obviously an ancient stone circle, sort of Stonehenge type, but a lot smaller. And that runs sort of north to south, roughly, to, I believe it's Beachy Head down on the south coast. Now, where these two ley lines intersect is Pendle Hill. So, if you, is there a defined standard? I don't know. Researching ley lines, which I've started to do of late, there's a lot. It depends. It depends what research you look at. There'll be ley lines all over the place, according to some people.
Well, I suppose it's not as simple as, but we've got the Rudston monolith. 6 miles from where I'm sat now. It's the tallest standing stone in Great Britain, and they'll say there's a ley line from the Rudston monolith to Stonehenge.
Yeah. Are
people just saying, well, we've got this monument and we've got this ancient monument, when we connect them up, there's a ley line? And I was tempted to say it's as simple as that, but it's not, because in my opinion, researchers do have a valid point that things are seen along these corridors. Yeah. Things do happen along these corridors. So it does add strength to the fact that even though show me the energy, let's plug that in. Let's see where is this ley line? Apart from you saying A reaches B on a map, but we can't see nothing, and you're just linking up ancient monuments.
That's right. Yeah.
The fact remains that the research does show that things of high strangeness, unusual things, do occur on these lines.
Well, this west to east one, which obviously sort of connects where I am with where you are, it runs through Menwith Hill, and it runs through Farlingdales. So they are the two early warning systems, aren't they? Yeah. To RAF and American Air Force early warning systems. So it just seems strange to me that they are on this line, which also runs through Pendle Hill, which is an area, as we've already discussed, that has lots and lots of different types of activity, not only UFO, but we can get on to the ghost stories that I've picked up around here and around Pendle.
Yeah.
It just seems strange that these these things are on what is clearly a line. You get a map and you get a ruler and you draw it, and they do link up.
So by saying that, we are proving that there is something to this. What a ley line is, what the energy that it produces, if any at all, I've no idea. And interesting that you just said that Menmouth Hill and Fylingdales, and that's, I wouldn't say running right through the research area that I've been looking into and where Les has been when we've been working on Wolflands, but a lot of the reports are coming out of that area.
Yeah.
Seriously, slap bang between it. So, which is interesting in itself. Don't expect you to have an answer to this, but if somebody in chat has, how do we define width of a ley line? Do you know? Does anybody know? Tell me. I'm interested. But...
See, I believe that a lot of it's got to do with geology as well. I mean, you look at, I mean, I'm no geologist, but if you look at, say, Pendle Hill, for instance, the reason why Pendle Hill is there is because it's a different type of rock to what's around it. And so the interaction between these different types of rocks, I mean, you go down to an area called the Rosendale Valley, which is sort of north of Manchester, really. Now, again, it's very, very strange geology. A lot of valleys, a lot of water courses. It's quite a large area, and Jenny Randalls has done a lot of investigation into that area down there because there are a lot historically of UFO sightings. So again, you've got strange geology or unusual geology, shall we say, compared to the surrounding area. You've got water courses, so you've got, you know, standing bodies of water. You've got running water, rivers, streams, everything else that you know can be channeling this magnetic energy or this naturally occurring. Maybe it's electronic energy. Who knows? But you know, it all seems to point to the same thing in my mind. That there is some natural energy involved, which is to do with the lay of the land and so on, you know.
Yep. Let's press Les for a few more questions.
In fact, actually, Paul, when I was thinking about this, I was going to ask you a question. I'm going to turn it around on you now.
No, I won't be able to answer it.
Well, no, because you obviously there's a hell of a lot of activity out on your way, and it's coastal, isn't it? I mean, I know there's a lot inland, but a lot of it is coastal. Now, do you think that's because of the North Sea? Do you think that's because of the sea, the interaction of the sea with the land? And
it could be, it could be, but you know, all the way up that coast, we've got UFO reports, cryptid reports, big cat reports, which. Yeah. I mean, how do we define the big cat reports? They could be just purely a result of people letting them go in the 1970s, 1976.
Yeah.
But we've got all that up there, and with regularity, it's incredible. But what is interesting now you've asked that question is 18 nautical miles. I think I probably said it other week, but I'm going to keep pushing it because some other research is going to jump on this. So I want to be one that's saying it. 18 nautical miles off Bempton and Flamborough. We've got this alleged magnetic anomaly. We say alleged because that's what the maps say. But I'm talking to trawlermen who I know, men who fish the sea like 20, 30 years, they've come across it odd times whilst fishing out there. But what's interesting, it's very close also to a prime meridian line. So, and I think to myself, I wonder if researchers in other areas where there's things of a high strangeness occurring have looked into this, because I think that maybe is worth looking into. But is it back to your question, are these things occurring because of the North Sea? I don't know, because they're probably occurring all around the coast. I think what you've got with me in particular, because if I look into some, I'm just like a terrier, I just can't stop. I've got to just keep gnawing at it until there's nothing left, is that I packed in work early enough to devote 100% of my time. These aren't 8-hour days. I've just never stopped. It's like 5 a.m. I'm up and I'm at it, and I'll be, when this is finished, I'll be looking at things. It's a bit sad, really, isn't it? But you know, that's the way I am. So yeah. maybe I'm unearthing. I guess what I'm saying, Craig, is maybe I'm unearthing things that are there to be unearthed in lots of other parts of the country and around the coasts. It's just having the time and energy. You get a lot of people who probably retired at 65. You know, old, I would say much older than me, but I'm at 59. But I've just whacked it. I'd finished with it at 48, me. But you know, at 59, you know, I've still got a few years before retirement. But what I'm saying is, at 65, going on for 70, they probably don't have as much energy to devote to doing this. Probably a long way around things. Sorry about that, Craig.
No. It's a perfectly valid answer. I think it's interesting. I think there's a lot of correlation. I think you're right. I mean, I think there's a lot of natural energy in this area around here. I think there's a lot of natural energy where you are, and I'm sure that there's a lot of natural energy down in, let's say, East Anglia, you know, where down on the southeast coast, where they get a lot of UFO activity down there. Again, you've got nuclear facilities, you've got places down in Suffolk, haven't you, that are now abandoned, but they were test sites for the Lord knows what back in the day. Back in the 50s,
You're right. A lot of the military sites, for some reason, and I don't know what it is, and I don't think they've housed anything to do with UFOs. I would say 99% of them around the world, that is, but particularly in UK. But they seem to attract a lot of unexplained phenomena. You know, we're not far from where we're looking at the things people have reported on the cliff tops. We've got the former RAF Bempton, which everybody knows were a radar base. I think it was 1945 it came and closed in 1970, and you know, there's a lot of unexplained phenomena attributed to RAF Bempton. Likewise, Fylingdales.
Yeah, there is.
People see a lot of UFO activity around Fylingdales. So military bases, for some reason, I mean, that one's been disused since 1970. It said 68, but they were still lightly manned up to 70. And why now then? Why now, all these years later, 52 years later, are we still getting activity around that base? I mean, it was used as an experimental radar station 2 times in its operational life. I have no idea what. Well, one of them was Operation Winkle, what a name! Yeah, I know, but what attempts into
that's Blackadder, wasn't it? Operation Winkle.
It sounds a bit like the Dream Turnip. I think they planted some of them there. But anyway, we sort of, I'm rambling, aren't I? So
no, it's a great conversation to have. I think there's a lot of mileage in it.
Yeah, what the Dream Turnip or
the Dream Turnip. Yeah, my own Dream Turnip.
People know what I'm talking about there. So where are we going to go now? Are we staying with the Black Monks of Accrington?
I think we can move on really from that. I mean, there was one other sighting that I was. I just got, again. I mean, I'm sure this happens to you. This probably happens to you 10 times a day, 100 times a day. You just get random emails thrown at you by people. I got a random email. I think I'd been on Howard's show, actually, Howard Hughes' show, and the day after I got a random email from a guy, and he said, because I've been talking about the Black Monks. And he said, I just wanted to let you know, he said, I just wanted to share with you an experience I had. Now, not too far away from the courts and the police station is an area called Broad Oak. And Broad Oak is where there's now a lot of sort of small factory units. But going back, to 150 years, there was a big mill, cotton mill on the site. And there was a train track that used to run past it to service it with goods and what have you. Now the tracks were lifted when in the 60s, was it, with the Beeching report? I think it was one of the lines that was dismantled but so in effect where the tracks were is still there, but there's just no tracks, and you can walk up and down it, what have you. Anyway, this guy said that he worked on Broad Oak, and he used to walk down the old train line, and he was walking down early one morning, and it was just coming light, and he noticed in the distance that there was somebody stood a couple of 100 yards in front of him, and he thought it was a bit strange because it was so early in the morning, he didn't usually see anybody around. So he carried on walking towards this figure, and he said as he got closer, he realised that it was dressed as a monk. And he said it had, the figure had a hood up, it had a cowl on, and he said it was your classic dressed as a monk. He said, but it was black, no sort of discerning features, no face, or anything like that. It was facing him. He said he could see the hood and everything, and he said he got within probably a few dozen yards away from it, and he said just disappeared, just went. And I swear to you that I wasn't hallucinating. What I saw was real. and he said it absolutely, made me jump. Not to put too fine a point on it.
It would do, wouldn't it? I mean,
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I just butt in here with a little story from a place called, let me get my facts right, Rudston Parva, which is, well, close to the Rudston monolith, but one of our daughters, should I say, were engaged to a lad whose parents owned a farm. It'll relate to what you're saying because I'm just curious here. And she was staying in farmhouse one night and in bed with her boyfriend, fast asleep. She was, and she woke up in the night. There's a wooden chest at the bottom of the bed. Now, she's not prone to fantasy, and she's listening. I don't know if she'll be listening to this, but she might at some point. She said she knows exactly what I'm going to say. She said, I looked, and there's a tall figure at the bottom of the bed, and I think she said there were two small ones at the side in hoods and robes.
Right.
You're saying a monk, and I'm thinking, why are we attributing it all the time to monks? Not to disrespect you, Craig, but there's a conical shaped glass, something like you'd have in a science lab, on the chest, and it's full of a glowing fluorescent green liquid, and they're pouring something into it. Jessica, I shouldn't have said her name. Well, she'll not mind. She said, he's asleep. I'm trying to wake him up. And I'm looking, and we're only at bottom of bed. We're only 6 foot away. Said, and one of them looked up in the hood, couldn't see her face, the little one. She said, and turned and began to move towards us, and I sort of went under the covers, and I was there, absolutely froze, terrified, middle at night, in a farmhouse in middle of nowhere. I don't plus mustered up the courage to have a look, and it was stood outside at bed looking at her, and that's all she remembers. But I guess I've just told that little cameo of a story, but I guess all I'm trying to get at is because obviously you wrote this book about the Black Monks, and that's probably what they were in due to the location.
Yeah.
But why Jessica could have said there was 3 monks, 2 small ones and a tall one. They were just people in hoods and robes. Why are we attributing them as monks?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I suppose historically that's what we think of as a monk wearing, a monk's habit, a cowl, a long flowing robe, and usually tied in the middle with a rope. That's the thing that pops into my mind,
In a lot of, like, I don't know, UFO lore, shall we say, abduction type scenarios, we hear of people talking about seeing the Greys, or that's the most common thing people report seeing. But we hear of people seeing beings in hoods and robes, and I don't always hear them saying they were monks. That's not pouring cold water on what you're saying here, because I just find it interesting. I wonder if it's just the human perception that some people are thinking, well, they're monks. Do you know what I mean? And
I think perception comes a lot into it, because I think that what we see depends on how we process what we're seeing, because I don't think that we would necessarily, me and you might not necessarily see the same thing.
Agreed.
And I think sometimes it's like your brain fills the gaps in.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at something and it's got a hood on, you immediately think monk. And so the rest of it, even though it might not actually necessarily be there as such, or it might look like something else, because you can't work out what it is, because you can't process what it is. Your brain fills the gaps in because you're not expecting to see it when you're seeing it. So perhaps there's an element of that. But I mean, I'm a great believer that certain people can see things that other people can't, or certain people can feel things that other people can't. And I mean, I've for years and years, I've always likened it to tuning an old-fashioned radio in, with a tuning dial, and you've just got to get the right frequency. And if you hit that, if you as a person hit that right frequency, but everybody might have different frequencies. Your frequency might be different to mine.
And you'll engage.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we're talking about sort of, like the geology of somewhere and the energy that somewhere gives off. There's certain places that I go to that just feel atmospheric to me. You know, like for instance, Morecambe Bay that we were talking about before. I get this. I'm really drawn to it. You know, I'm really drawn to Morecambe Bay. I don't know why. I mean, it's a beautiful place. It's very, very, you know, very flat. It's desolate. There's nothing there really, and yet for some reason I'm really, really drawn to it. And I will go back there time after time after time after time. It's the same with Pendle Hill and the area around here. I mean, maybe that's why I ended up meeting my wife and living here, because I'm drawn to. I've always been drawn to it ever since I was a child, you know. So there are certain places that I feel I'm drawn to. Now, perhaps I'm on that right frequency.
Yeah, I suppose, and that applies to everything in life. You know, when you're house hunting,
yeah,
we're talking about the unexplained, but you can walk into a property and you think, "Nah, this isn't for me," and then suddenly you just, I could live here. And you connect with this I don't know, the ambience of the property, don't you?
Exactly. It's the feeling, isn't it? It's like an attachment that you sort of have with, and it's very difficult to explain what it is. It's just a feeling that you have about somewhere.
Well, unless Les has got more questions, where are we going to take this next, Craig? Because 1 second as well. I did originally, because Craig, as we've said earlier, Craig's kindly stepped in and taken over for us tonight because our guest couldn't make it. But I'd got a pile of things, new information that we're going to talk about, and I were really looking forward to sharing, which I'm not going to do because I don't think it's fair. It needs to be spoken about and done justice to. A lady's encounter or sighting from close to Speeton, should we say, and Filey, and I want to talk about it, but I'm probably going to have to do that next week, so I apologise.
I was going to say, Les, do you want to take a vote on that? Because I'm quite happy for Paul to tell us about that. Don't ask Paul to take a vote on it.
Yeah, I'd like to fit that one in, you guys, but we have so many questions in tonight.
We're going to do these questions, Craig.
Oh, fine, yeah.
And you know, I'm just going to get you know, for not.
Les will get earache for not doing it. Well, I like Les getting earache though, don't you? It's good, isn't it? It saves me getting it.
It lets me off the hook if you answer if there's lots of questions, you see, because I'm racking my brains what to talk about.
No, right then. Lee Roscoe is in the chat tonight, and welcome to the show, Lee. And I've got to say, it was we did meet up a couple of weeks ago, and it was great meeting you guys. So thank you very much there. Lee's got a question. Hi, Craig. Thanks for the time tonight. First of all, any more stories on the new piano? Now, I think you're going to talk about this later, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the piano, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll hold that one in abeyance there.
Something happened this afternoon about that.
Right, yeah. So I'll just move.
Last time, yeah. Go on.
I don't even have to make a note of that, do I? Because
I'm just going to move on then. Nickname. Welcome to the show. Nickname. Has anyone ever gone back to help the ghosts leave? So,
which ones?
He's not saying his nickname.
It's probably meaning in general, as anybody
goes back to help these ghosts move on. You know, when they move on.
Yeah, well, the Warner Street one, the Poltergeist. I forgot to mention that he identified himself as called Josiah. Now, I believe that the woman who owned the shop, before she got the lady that I spoke to go in there, and again, you know, I've done a lot of research on this anyway. I've tried to verify everything that she said. She did get another medium to go in to try and exercise the place, and it just made it 100 times worse. You know, the energy just increased tenfold. And I've heard that from other people as well. I talked to a lady who lived in a house in a place called Clayton-le-Meuse, which again is quite close to Accrington. She had massive amounts of poltergeist activity. Again, it's in the first book, Shadow Man of Accrington. She had massive amount of poltergeist activity. She said to me the worst thing she ever did was get a Catholic priest in, to bless the house and to exercise these, because it turned out there were a number of spirits. I mean, we're talking dozens. To go in and try and get these spirits to move on, because she said it just made things 10 times worse.
It kind of activated and excited the atmosphere. Do when we first moved in here in 93/94, I can't remember exact date, Reverend Willis knocked on our door. If anybody doesn't know who Reverend Willis is, do a bit of Googling. He was Britain's official exorcist for the Catholic Church, and he was resident in Bridlington. And we never asked him to come. And he knocked on the door, said he'd been told a new family had moved in, and he wanted to exercise the house. Wants to bless the house, was his words. Bless the house. And he went all around the house, went into the top bedroom, and said, I wouldn't let your children sleep in this room. And he'd been to this house before. I didn't find out the previous occupants and what had gone off in the house before, but afterwards we did realise during the course of probably burning bags and bags of letters, bin liners of letters, that it were all automatic writing, and there'd been spiritualists. So obviously something had attached itself to the property. And in a future podcast, because this is your podcast tonight, a neighbour's come across today to tell us that she saw something strange on the landing windows yesterday in this property in daytime. But, so I'll just leave that one hanging. But let's carry on, Les. Sorry.
Yeah, and let's have a look then. Dragon Noir, and I guess it's a good question, is what is a shadow person, Craig?
Yeah, I saw that question. It's an interesting one. As shallow as it sounds, it's very interesting. What is it? Because I don't know.
I don't know. It could be that there's some theories that I've read that it's a poltergeist type manifestation, because as we've discussed, there was with the one that I saw and the one that I think was the same one in Warner Street, there was definite intent. There was intelligence there. Another theory that I read, which I think is really interesting, was time slips, and it's actually somebody partially coming through a time slip. So you don't see the them as a person. You don't see them, the facial features, or you just see the outline. You just see the shadow of them in effect. Like the shadow of somebody on a wall, and if that sort of thing, light shining on somebody, and you see the shadow on the wall. That it's that coming through, but it's not coming all the way through. So that's one theory that I've read. It could be either. I tend to lean towards the second one, the time slip one. To me, it feels like it's something coming through from somewhere else, and I think a lot of spirits, a lot of ghosts that are not these stone tape type ghosts, which is that residual energy, as I said, where you've got a poltergeist, or you've got a ghost that's got sort of intelligence or intent. Sometimes I think they're not on the same plane as us. They're not on in the same time frame that we are, and that's why we don't see them fully. We see an outline of them, or we see a shape of them, or we see a shadow. I've been seeing a lot of shadows in our house recently, and I'll come to that in a bit. But I think that's what they are. But there's definitely an intelligence to them, because you read reports from all over the world, going back years, that they all have the same appearance, and they all have the same sort of MO, as it were. They're all very, very similar. So
Craig,
maybe it's a different species than us.
Okay. Honestly, I don't know. But if we stay with spirit for a moment, you're talking about poltergeist, you're talking about ghosts, you're talking about the stone tape ghosts. Are these? Let's assume then that it's this presence, this energy, this apparition is all from one person. Can it be three? Why is it only one?
I don't know.
Okay.
It could be multiple. I mean, this shadow man that we see all over the world through time could be just one entity, could be one person, or one thing that's just popping up all over the place.
It should have to pop up a lot of times, won't it?
Well, it would, yeah.
It'd be like the Godhead, you know. Well, let's get another question off, Les. I'm losing myself with these shadow people.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I did notice earlier there was some super chat came in, and thanks immensely, because every little helps. And we know these times are going to be challenging for us folks, monetary wise. But yeah, thanks for all the super chat. What's coming in? Right, then I'm going to move on with. Let's have a look. Pendle Hill UFOs, and the question is, could they be alien drones, kind of thing? I think that's when you mentioned the multicoloured lights on the
multicoloured lights. Yeah, they could be. Yeah, they could be. There could be a bigger craft somewhere that we can't see, and yeah, they could be probes or drones or something like that. You know, they might not necessarily be controlled by an intelligence actually in the orb. You know, they might be being controlled by an intelligence from somewhere else.
Before Les goes on to another question, do you want to touch on the Pendle Hill UFOs then? Have you got anything to talk about regarding them?
Well, yeah, like I said, there was the one that was the multicoloured disco lights.
Yeah, the disco ball. Yeah.
There was just bear with me a sec, because there was July 2010. There was one that I mentioned over Ogden Clough. I never got around to mentioning that when they saw this one, this ball of light, they could hear screaming coming from up on the fells, and so they actually walked up and went up onto the fells, and they were following this orb of light. Now, it's very marshy around there, to be honest. And I know they said screaming, and it was actually quite early in the morning. It was about 2:00 in the morning, apparently. This is a report that I've tried to verify, and it's one that I found. I've tried to contact the couple who made this report. The email that was on the report is dead. It's just bouncing back, so I can't verify this. But there's a lot of marshy areas up there. And the way that this one was described as behaving, I tend to think it might have been marsh gas.
Yeah.
And the screaming, well, you get a lot of cars parking up on Pendle Hill at night. Let's put it that way. So that one takes a bit of investigating. I think
probably needs more work, and
probably does, yeah.
Credibility online. It's a little bit sketchy, in it, at the moment.
It is. There was one in 2012. Now, this was reported to Lancashire Police from numerous locations. 8:37 in the evening, there was a guy rang Lancashire Police from Burnley, said there's a big white light hovering over Pendle. He said I reckon it's probably about 3,000 feet up. How we worked that out from a distance, I don't know, but that's what he said. And there was then at least half a dozen other reports came in from people who lived all around Pendle Hill. So on one side you've got Burnley, you've got a town called Corn. On this side where I live, you've got Clitheroe, which is the major town on this side of the hill. So there were again reports from Clitheroe, from Corn, from Burnley, from various other places. They're all ringing and saying there's this huge white light that's hovering above the hill. Stayed there for about 3 hours, apparently. The police sent a car up to have a look. They saw it. Couldn't work out what it was. It wasn't an aircraft. It wasn't a helicopter. There was nothing. Nothing had been logged flight-wise. And then again, it did the classic thing. It just suddenly shot up vertically and disappeared out of sight. That was reported by at least half a dozen people, and Lancashire Police. I did an FOI request to both Greater Manchester Police and Lancashire Police, and the Lancashire Police one. It's that report is actually in there. So it's a bona fide sighting. Is that one?
Okay, Les, hit us with some more.
Yes, I've got a question from Umbraman. Umbraman is asking, Is there any footage of the repeating wailing woman?
Footage, not that I'm aware. When I spoke to Stuart, who was the guy that took me around the school and told me about what had been going on there, as far as I'm aware, he didn't have any footage of it. No.
Okay.
Well, just over on that one for a moment. What do they tell the school children? Are they aware of this?
Yeah.
All right. Do they get reports off the school children?
Yeah. And teachers. In fact, quite a few members of staff have left over the years.
That kind of validates it a little bit more, because you can imagine, I don't mean children just exaggerating things, but, you know, if one says he's seen it, suddenly we've got a bit of hysteria, but the teachers would be asked to suppress it a little bit, wouldn't they, and play it down.
Yeah.
So if we've got teacher reports within the school, then that kind of makes it a little bit more credible, doesn't it?
Yeah, there was actually another incident which involved the ghost of a little boy as well that was at the school. And now my wife is a teacher, and one of her friends used to teach at this school. Now she verified this. I asked her about this one, and what had happened was there were two pupils, two girl pupils were. They'd take a selfie of themselves with a mobile phone. And when they looked at the picture, stood in between them was a little boy dressed in your sort of classic Victorian rags. Now, they actually gave this photo to one of the teachers who worked there and said, "Look at this, miss," you know, and sent it to her phone from the girl's phone. And this teacher kept this photograph. I would love to see it, but unfortunately she'd left and gone off and got a different job somewhere, and he didn't know where she'd gone to. I asked my wife's friend about it. She said, "Yes, I remember her," because he gave me the name. He said, "I remember her. I remember her saying something about a photograph." She said, "I never saw it because I didn't really speak to her that much." But she said, "I remember her talking about a photograph. Yes, the school's haunted. There's all sorts of stuff going on, and I can't remember which, you know, when she moved, which other school she went to." So that was sort of semi-verified by somebody independent.
Excellent. Les, have we more questions? Or
Yeah, this isn't a question. It's just a statement. And Dragon Noir is saying it's an EME, an electromagnetic entity.
that's in response to the. I'm assuming, because I did look for his reply in the chat. When
Right.
he's the guy who said a ghost would not self-ignite or spontaneous combustion. So
it's interesting that because I think that's where a bit of local legend comes into it, because there's the, you know, people know about the abbey burning down in effect.
Right.
I think that aspect of it has got itself attached in a sort of folklore type way to the ghost of this girl. I'm not convinced that that's what people see, you know.
How much do you think that some people's accounts, and I'll include the things that I research here as well and look into, and everybody else, is muddied by people that I won't say want their 5 minutes of fame. It's not fame, is it? But how much do you think of that muddies the waters really for the true?
Because they're like, sorry, I'm getting feedback again. I think like I said, my granddad was a brilliant storyteller, and he used to tell me ghost stories from the area around where he lived. I think a lot of it was to stop me playing down by the Leeds-Liverpool Canal and probably falling in. But he used to tell me, but you see, those stories have been passed down from generation to generation, and it's like Chinese whispers, isn't it? So I think you're right. You know, I think things get embellished. You know, things get a little bit blown up more than, you know, each time they're told, each time they're passed down. And sometimes I think local legend and folklore, it does muddy the waters with what's actually physically happening.
Yeah, at all times though, I think we have to acknowledge that there is a grain of truth within
Of course.
what's being spoken.
Yeah.
When I first started looking into what's led us to Wolflands, it was the first book and the stories that I were getting from around the Flixton area, what people call the Flixton werewolf.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And people were saying to me, when I were in the village, I actually went door knocking, which is it's a brave thing to do. Asking, I didn't ask them about a werewolf. I asked about unexplained phenomena and things. Yeah, I think the thing to do is just approach it subtly. But when we actually got into what I was looking into, I mean, some of the people said that they'd never heard of this thing. They didn't know what I was on about. Others, 5 generations in Flixton and Fulton, 5 generations, said to me, it was just a story that my granddad and his granddad before used to say to keep us children in at night, that there's a werewolf. Yeah. But then one of these 5 generations people actually spoke to me when he realised I was still digging. I wouldn't let it go. I kept repeating. I kept coming back to the village that he'd seen it.
Yeah.
And he weren't just trying to pacify me. These are sort of ardent farming types. But he realised that I weren't doing it as a joke and a gimmick to write to not even local papers, one at papers where we can just get us facing paper for a few £100 and a bit of cheap publicity to push the book, because I've never done that ever. And then he said, I've seen it. I can tell you now. In 1948. And he says there's some burial mounds just out of the village called up at the top of Staxton Brow, and the burial mounds are called Sharp How. He says, and in 1948, me and another boy, we were obviously young lads at the time, were up there playing. Summer's evening, 8:30, 9:30 at night. Could do what we wanted in 1948. Parents didn't even lock doors. A different world to today. And we came across this thing, sat with its back to a tree, not in the night, but obviously evening, and it's looking at something in its hands. And he said hands, and it looked up at him, and then looked back down. He said, and we turned and ran. And I asked him, describe what you saw. He says, it were a dog in the shape of a man, fur covered. Now, it took me ages. I'd been visiting that location, that area, and to get that story from that man. I wrote about it. It's in Truth Proof 1, but it took me a long time. He didn't laugh at me when I first started asking. He just didn't want to tell me. And now I know it's your show this, but I'm just going to say, I know in the village, somewhere in Flixton and Fulton, there is a book of werewolves.
Right.
There's a book of accounts.
Yeah.
And I don't mind saying it on a live stream, I'll be honest with you, because, and Leslie's probably thinking, why are you telling people that, Paul? They're not going to find it, because I've dug and I will find it, because I'm onto people who probably know where it is. It's not like the Holy Grail. It's just a book that resided in a pub for many years, that's not been in existence now for a lot of years. But somebody's got that book, and I don't want it, but I want to look at the contents of that book and the reports, and it exists. Yeah. So it kind of interests me. But and I realise I've just said this, and there's somebody in chat that shared this information with me. So it's superb. So fire away, Craig. Let's keep going. Okay.
Is there any more questions, Les?
Please, Les. No, we're going to do it now in a moment.
Yeah, we're just going to do a little bit of housekeeping now. Craig, can you tell people where to go? Have you got a website or anything? And where can they buy your books from?
Yeah. Before we go, I've got to mention the piano.
We're not going yet. We've got 30
not going yet. All right, then. Okay. Well, my website, you don't get away that easy. My website is www.craigbryant.co.uk. So it's dead easy. There's links on the website to both of the books, which are on Amazon. So just go to the website and you'll see the books. Just click on them, take you to Amazon. There's also a link for my podcast as well, which is called Paranormal Pendle Podcast. So yeah, all the links are on the website. It's the best place to go really to find all the stuff.
Great stuff. And Paul?
You what, Les?
And Paul, have you got a website?
Oh, yeah, I have, yeah. It's truthproof.uk, and I'm not responsible for that website, people. Don Lodge puts all the information on for me, and I'm so lucky to have Don helping me with the website. And Deb Singleton, she's created a database of all the reports from the Truth Proof books and put them on there so you can see patterns forming. Far harder than I've worked. It's absolutely brilliant. And obviously, if any new reports that we get, we're putting them on there. So if anybody wants to take the reports and put them on their website, all we ask is that you give us credit. So, you know, we're not so clinging that we want them all to ourselves. But what I will say is they're original. You won't find these reports anywhere else in the world. It's a sweeping statement, but you won't. Well, until somebody in this chat takes them and wants to put them on the website. So yeah, truthproof.uk. You can buy the books through the website. The Kindles are still available on Amazon, but I withdrew the paperback books from Amazon. I had my reasons for doing that, but there we go.
Okay, and for anybody who just missed that, most of the links are in tonight's stream description, so you'll be able to find them there.
Eating off because I'm absolutely melting in here.
I can't afford to put mine on, Paul, now.
Oh, well. Yeah,
another question. Gavin Nichols is asking, do you think UFOs may be ghosts from an ancient civilization on Earth? It's an interesting one.
It's an interesting kind of question, but I don't know. Would that imply then that these ghosts can actually leave their craft, if you want to call it a craft, and interact with humans? Who can say? Good question, but I've not thought about it enough to give you a solid answer.
No, they could be time travelers. Because it's quite strange that I mean, it might just be because we've got better at recording things, but certainly since the end of the Second World War, I think we'd find that there's been a lot more recorded UFO sightings. That's not to say that prior to the Second World War and prior to the nuclear age, there weren't sightings, because obviously we've discussed that there have been, and there's been a lot. But I think there's been a lot more recorded incidents of UFOs. Now, of course, I start to question my own sanity when I say that, because then I think, well, if they're coming back and they're trying to tell us, something bad's going to happen, and we don't want you to do this and we don't want you to do that, why don't they just land in 10 Downing Street or on the lawn of the White House, or better still, on the roof of the Kremlin, and tell us that that there is something nasty imminently going to happen, and you have to stop it, otherwise blah blah blah.
I think, Craig,
they're not doing that, are they? So what are they here for, in effect?
I think we all ask them questions, though, don't we? Anybody we all ask those questions, but what we probably don't take into account is how important we feel we are.
Mm.
And in the grand scheme of things, let's assume this is it's got to be some super intelligence to evade our detection of all this time, yet interact with people in such a way that it actually tattoos the mind and they can't get it out of the mind what they've seen and experienced. But so what I'm getting at is they might consider a blade of grass just as important as what we are.
Mm.
What we think we're far more important than what we are, and obviously, I suppose they are presenting in the shape bipedal for the most part, arms and legs. So we may be a little bit more important than a blade of grass. I'm contradicting myself, but I don't know. In grand scheme of things, we're probably of little significance.
Maybe they're appearing like that because that's that form is familiar to us.
Yeah, good point. We had Kes Clark on a few weeks ago, and she just gave an amazing account of the Penturk incident. Well, her own experience. That's all she could do, and it was passionate, and she really put it over well. And some people would say, "Well, why choose you?"
Mm.
And that's no disrespect to Kaz. Why not choose Kaz? If they'd have chose an MP or somebody distinguished, they'd have probably gone to the powers that be, and nobody would have ever heard of this. if that's the scenario, if this is what's playing out, so by choosing this lady, if that's what's happened, they've got a voice that's telling the world.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a method in the madness.
Yeah, interesting.
I think so, and a fabulous account. I don't know if you listened to it.
No, I didn't. But
No,
I'll seek it out.
yeah, I would. It's brilliant. Right, okay, then let's. It is with
Yeah, Nickname is asking, what is the difference between a poltergeist and a ghost?
Well, poltergeists tend to be more physically interactive with people, I think. There tends to be some sort of intelligence there. There seems to be some motive. Interestingly, I think there is a very good theory that poltergeists appear or become attached to somewhere or someone when there is a young person involved. So, somebody who's going through a child who's going through puberty, that's giving off a lot of, again, we're back to this emotional energy argument. So they're giving off a lot of emotional energy. The more I think about what's been going on in my house, the more I'm beginning to think that my 15-year-old son, who is extremely smelly, extremely Kevin the teenager.
Yeah.
I swear to God, he's got a tapeworm with him out of food he's eating at the minute. He's nearly as big as me, and I'm 6'2".
You like, don't do him any favors.
He's a fantastic kid, but he's just hard work at the minute.
Yeah.
But over the last couple of years, and I'll get onto the. I mean, this piano that I think this something is attached to. We've had it for 10 years, and there's been little bits of things over the years, but the last couple of years, which has coincided with. The more I think about it, the more it coincided with my son changing. I think that the energy that he's giving off is increasing the energy that is surrounding this piano. Whatever's attached to it, I think, is feeding off him. And I know it sounds a bit Hollywood.
You're going to have to elaborate now. You've got
head spinning, and projectile vomiting and all. But no, I mean, he's not done that. It's not The Exorcist. But I think over the last couple of years, where we've noticed a definite increase in seeing things out the corner of our eyes. This is myself and my wife and my son. We've felt things being in the same room as us. I certainly have. Strange smells. So very strong perfume I've smelt on a number of occasions. And also tobacco smoke as well. Neither of us smoke. We haven't smoked in this house. We haven't smoked for 15 years. Either of us. We used to be, but since we moved into this house, we've never smoked. So I've smelled really strong tobacco smoke, and my wife has as well. The room where the piano is. Now this was bought from a shop in Clitheroe, by the way, a piano shop in Clitheroe. It's I go a little bit into the history of it because I think it's important in the book. Where it was made. It's got a brass plaque on it on the inside with a model number. It's made by a German company. It was made in Leipzig in 1906, so it's quite an old piece of furniture. I can't play a note, by the way. My wife can. She's very musical. She came from a very musical family, and the reason we bought it, we had a bit of money, and she wanted a piano. She wanted our son to learn to play the piano, and he wanted to play the piano. He didn't last very long, as it is with kids, but she still occasionally has a bit of a tinkle with it. But most of the time, it's just sat there doing nothing, looking nice. But we've noticed, as I said, over the last couple of years, that these incidents have become more and more prevalent. The room where it is in the dining room, which is it's not a through dining room or anything like that. It's a separate room in the house, and it is absolutely freezing cold in there. Even in summer, it's absolutely freezing cold. Go on.
Why are you attributing it to a piano? I'm not saying it's not.
Yeah.
And if you want to test the experiment, why not move it into another room? I know they're a big lump to move.
I can't. Well, yeah, it took 6 of them to get it in the house for a start off, so it's not going to get moved. Sarah bought it, so she bought it with her own money. And about a week after she bought it, she was made redundant. And she then went through a period of having really bad luck when it came to a job and various jobs that she had. She ended up being a supply teacher for a while. She did get another job. She was made redundant from that again. She then carried on getting supply jobs and so on. So I've always attributed her bad luck because it happened at the same time as she bought this piano, you see. So we've had all these visual things that have been happening with these shadows. We were sat probably about 6 weeks ago now, maybe a couple of months ago. Me and I were sat in the lounge one Saturday night. We're watching TV, and we both said at the same time, we swore, flipping heck, did you see that?
Yeah, I do that all the time.
Yeah, and we both saw a shadow moving across the room. Now, the curtains were drawn. We live on a cul-de-sac. There were no cars outside. It wasn't car lights or anything like that. We've got big, thick, heavy curtains up anyway, and we're set up back from the road. So it's not car lights. No. I've seen these shadows before. It's like something that you see out of the corner of your eye. Now, I saw one today, this afternoon. I was sat in the lounge. I was thinking about what we were going to chat about, and I had the dogs down with me, and they were all asleep apart from one who was sat sort of half on me knee, half on the settee, and she sat bolt upright, and she looked up into the top corner of the room. She was definitely looking at something. I could tell. I could actually feel, because she was led on my knee, I could feel a heartbeat increase. Quite odd, but I could feel it. Her heart was beating that fast. She obviously saw something, and I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. And again, I thought to myself, it's doing it again. But the most bizarre thing, and this is only the second time I've told this story. If anybody was on the last live stream I did, because I'm not sure whether that guy that asked about the piano remembered it from when I was on the Core2 live stream. The most amazing thing that happened was we have got the front door has got it's a UPVC front door, and the letterbox is like a brass letterbox, and it's on a really tight spring. So you've really got to push something through. If you push,
a bit like Arkwright's till, is it? It's just
yeah, something like that actually. Yeah. Now, if you're pushing a letter through, you can't get it all the way through sometimes, and so it gets stuck in effect, and you have to pull it through from the inside. And when you pull it through, the letterbox makes a snapping like that. One of them. So anyway, this leaflet, one of the bit of junk mail, had been stuck in the letterbox for about 2 or 3 days. Couldn't be bothered pulling it through. We hadn't had any post or anything like that for a couple of days, so it hadn't been shoved through, or I had pulled it through. And we have like a vestibule, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And we've also got a video doorbell, okay? And there's glass in the door. So it's frosted glass, but I can see through if anybody's outside. Now, there was nobody outside, okay? I know that for a fact. There was nobody around. Nobody stood at the other side of the door. So I was in the vestibule, and I was putting my walking boots on, getting the dog leads together and everything else. And I was literally stood within 2 feet from the door. And this leaflet, something invisible, the only way I can describe it, an invisible hand grabbed hold of it and pulled it out of the letterbox right in front of me. And I watched it snap, and it fell to the floor. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, there was it wasn't pushed through from outside. There was nobody about, absolutely nobody about. I didn't get any strange feeling when it happened. I didn't feel like there was anything else there with me. I mean, this vestibule's probably about 4 feet by 4 feet. Yeah. So if there was something in there that was, I would have felt it, or the dogs would have felt it, or seen it, or reacted. They didn't, but something grabbed it and pulled it, yanked it through the letterbox. It was the most bizarre thing.
Did you see that happen? Did you see?
Yeah, I actually saw it coming out.
Well, that's just crushed my question, because I was going to say, could your dogs have pulled it?
No.
You know, our dogs like papers when postman or letters. You know,
No.
but,
No, it wasn't. No, it literally, it moved in it just thin air.
Yeah,
you know, something invisible grabbed it and pulled it.
It's crazy, and you know, you touched on the, and I had to laugh. I'm sorry, because I was half looking at the questions and I seen Deb say you've outed your son for smelling.
you know Kevin the teenager, the Harry Enfield character.
Yeah.
If people don't know, just look him up on YouTube. Absolutely spot on. Yeah.
But, excuse me. You know, you talk about poltergeist activity and teenagers and puberty, and but what we're dealing with actually, in my opinion, is emotional energy.
Yeah.
Because as you know, in times of great trauma, a bereavement or something like that, people claim to see loved ones, you know, the people passed and things. And it's the emotional and the emotional energy that's kind of tapping in to this other realm, I think.
Yeah.
So we can call it with teenagers puberty, but we can call it with bereavement. But it is emotional energy, the conduit to tap into the other side. If we could learn how to harness that or create something that could, I don't know, mimic that effect, perhaps we could see what's there.
Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? You know,
my dad told me an interesting story. I mean, he's passed now. And you know what? I actually wish that I could speak to him again and I could see him, but I never have. You know, wherever he's gone, he's obviously happy and don't want to come back. But I remember him telling me my mum's dad, so my maternal grandfather, in fact the one that used to tell me stories, Bill. On the day of his funeral, my dad said that when we all went back to my grandma's house, as we do for, you know, in northern towns for a week, you know, we all go back to the house, sandwiches and all that malarkey. He said he saw my granddad sat in his favourite chair.
Really?
Yeah. And he was quite close to me. To my granddad Bill was my dad. He had a really good relationship with him, you know, which for son-in-law and father-in-law is, you know, quite nice. But yeah, they had quite a close relationship, and he said he saw him sat there in his favourite chair where he always sat in the lounge. There were other people in the room, you know, we were all sat around, and he was just sat there, and he said he was just looking out through the window, and he said he just had this really nice smile on his face.
And you know, that kind of story, that kind of account, it validates a lot for me, because not just yours, but other people's, because I think at a time of great emotional stress, great loss, those are the times that we wouldn't make things up.
No, that's right.
Do you know what I mean? Because you know, when you're talking about loved ones, are you talking about something that you love, someone or something that you love dearly? You wouldn't kind of make up some story to entertain the friends who are there that day or afterwards.
Yeah.
That, you know, because it'd be disrespectful to the person that you loved.
Oh, it was many years later when he told me. And you know, I mean, for a long time we didn't have a particularly good relationship, me and my dad. You know, we didn't talk about things.
You probably thought you were a smelly teenager.
Well, he probably thought I was a lanky, smelly, grumpy teenager. Yeah, I wonder where my lad gets it from. In fact, I think I was. I still am now, according to my wife. But no, it was years later when he told me this, and it was just completely out of the blue, you know. So I never doubted what he said at all, you know. I mean, I just hope that wherever he is obviously he's happy and or he's content or he's at rest or whatever, because, you know, if I want anybody to come back and see me that's passed on, I would want it to be my dad. But he never has. So
do you know, it's strange, Craig, that this phenomena that we unexplained phenomena that we're all interested in and looking into, it kind of jumps up and surprises us when we least expect it. So you
Yeah.
can expect the unexpected. You just never know.
Oh,
Now we've got approximately 10 minutes left. 5 probably. So I'm going to ask Les if he's any more questions. I'm going to put him on the spot. He might not have, but he'll get punished if there's been some questions asked and he hasn't read them out. So have we any, Les?
Oh, yes. Well, I get punished if I don't ask these questions, guys.
Well, not off me, you won't.
Right. Alex Wingfield, a good question.
Hi, Alex.
Yeah.
Nice to hear from you.
Yeah. Craig, do you have any experience of interaction/dialogue with ghosts?
Interaction, yes. Dialogue, no. Like I said, I've seen ghosts. Obviously, I've seen the Shadow Man. I've witnessed poltergeist activity. I've witnessed objects being thrown and broken. I've obviously recently witnessed a leaflet being pulled through a letterbox because I can't explain it. That just going back to that, I cannot explain that other than some invisible force grabbed it and made it move. So yeah, I've interacted in that way. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with a ghost.
Have you heard a voice?
Have I heard a voice? No, I haven't actually. I've seen things, like I said, shadows, movement, and I've had the smells as well. Like I said, the smells in the house, the odd smells in the house. That's probably my son's bedroom, yeah.
I'm gonna have to stop. Sorry, carry on.
No, it's fine. So no, I've had that sort of interaction. That's not. I suppose that's not interaction as such. That's just being aware of something. But I suppose you can call that interaction. But no, I'd love to. I'd love to stand face to face with a ghost and ask it questions.
Before Les goes to another question, if I've got time, me and my wife Mary, we heard a voice
right
years and years ago when we were. I think I'd have been 19, she'd have been 20, or I might have been 18 and she was 19.
I just remembered something actually. I'm sorry, no, I've interrupted. I'm just remembering.
No, it's fine.
I've heard singing once.
Really?
Mm. But anyway, go on. Sorry.
No, you've got to elaborate now. Tell us.
Right, well, that was at the old house we lived at, and that was again. There's a chapter in the first book that I wrote about the house that we lived in prior to this one. That was there were two elderly ladies still around, and they were actually relatives of the lady that lived next door. They were her aunts. It's a long story how it all came about, but I saw one of them. My wife never saw anything, but she did feel that there were presences in the room with her. When we were moving out of the house, there was all sorts went on, lots of noise, lots of bangings. It was almost like they were having a tantrum because we were leaving the house, and I actually had to stand in the bedroom and explain to them why we were leaving and where we were going to and who was moving in, and it all stopped. So that was quite strange. But one summer's evening, we both heard this. This was when our son was less than 12 months old. We actually both heard somebody singing. I was out the back of the house. Sarah was in the front of the house watching TV, and we heard a woman singing "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star," and we both heard it at the same time. The house was in a row of six. It was a row of 6 terraced houses. We were the only couple in the row that had children. So there would be no reason for anybody else, and there weren't any other houses around. There was actually a funeral parlour behind where we live, believe it or not.
Was it a child's voice?
No, it was a woman's voice, but it sounded elderly. It sounded like an older woman's voice. and she was I could hear it, but it wasn't there, if you know what I mean. It wasn't. It was coming from somewhere that I couldn't work out where it was coming from. But I just knew that it was otherworldly, if you know what I mean. It just had that feeling about it. Now, we had an outhouse. I was in the outhouse at the back of the house. It was actually because it was an old weaver's cottage.
Right.
The outhouse at the back actually used to be the outside toilet, and when they put inside toilets in, they converted it, and we had our washing machine and stuff in there. It was like a little outside utility room. So I was in there and I could hear it. Now I went back into the house and I walked into the lounge and I said to Sarah, I said, "You never get." I said, "Something really weird's happened. I've just heard somebody singing," and she said, and she stopped me midway through the sentence, and she said, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star."
So
and I said, "Yeah." And we both legged it upstairs because our son was in his cot upstairs in his bedroom, and we both legged it upstairs because we were convinced that somebody had got into the house and had got into his bedroom and was singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" to him, but there was nobody there. You know,
strange things that you'll never be able to explain. But
so I apologize. I have heard something, but it's not the same as having a conversation with somebody. I mean, you know, it's like, Paul. You sometimes you forget things, and
there's
you
so
know,
many things, Craig.
I'm getting to that age now where my memory's going, and
no, seriously, I think we all do it. There's so many stories. We've got 3 or 4 minutes left. I don't know if Les has got time for another question.
I might get a couple in. Michael Adams is asking Paul, do you have any plans to investigate Pendle Hill?
I don't, Michael. To be quite honest, I'm just kind of swamped with what we're doing. I'm overwhelmed if I'm being truthful, and I've got some amazing reports. And I'll just briefly say, and I'm not going to talk about it, but if Craig hadn't been on tonight, I was going to talk about some things, and I'd already contacted one of the witnesses to ask if they minded if I spoke about it, and I know she's in chat, and obviously we've not talked about it, but it deserves a little bit more than 2 minutes. So that's why it's not been spoken about. Right, let's go on, fire away.
Sal Amy, has Craig or Paul investigated Marston Moor?
I haven't.
No, I haven't, but I believe that there's a lot of paranormal activity, which obviously surrounding the Civil War battle. I believe that the sound of soldiers fighting and various other things are sort of seen and heard on a regular basis. So I think it's an interesting place. And again, it's one of these places where you've got, you know, there must be that much emotional energy that's residual there. It doesn't surprise me at all, you know, that there's a lot of phenomena. So I'd love to. I've driven past it quite a few times. I've just never stopped and looked at it. It's just a field, I think, isn't it now?
I've no idea, to be honest. It's I don't know where it is.
It's not that far from. It's not that far from it. It's sort of in between, really, where you and I are, and sort of a bit north, up in North Yorkshire somewhere, I think. So
okay, fire away, Les.
Yeah, last couple of minutes. Tim Brennan is asking Craig, do you have any reports from Dunsop Bridge?
Not any specific reports, no, but Dunsop Bridge is an interesting place because it is supposedly the geographical centre of the United Kingdom. So, and again, there is a water. Well, there's a river. I think it's the Hodder, the River Hodder, which flows into the River Ribble. So yeah, there's a water course runs through there. So I would imagine that there probably is quite a bit of energy in that area, and I've no doubt there is paranormal activity of some description. I've not come across any UFO reports in that area, I must admit, but I would imagine that there will be some sort of phenomena going on around there. Yeah.
Okay, well, I've just got to end on this one. We're in the last minute. Umbraman, not so much a question, he's making a statement. If Doggerland was a massive land bridge to Europe from the east coast, do ley lines and high strangeness happen underwater where all these folks once lived? So it was a question.
Well, I would have thought so. I would have thought not just where these folks once lived. I would have thought that they just cross oceans. I don't think that as people, as a population, that we have any bearing on where a ley line would be. It's probably just the significance of the people. The people knew the significance of the land and placed their great monuments and earthworks in these locations, and I think that's the reason.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're out of time, but I'll just leave the last word with you on that one, Craig.
Okay.
You'd have to make it really short.
Yeah, I mean, there's an ancient burial site on the top of Pendle Hill, Bronze Age burial site. So why would they go 2,000 feet up in the sky to bury somebody when they could have buried them in a field at the bottom? You know, why trail the body all the way up the side of a hill?
Superb.
Right.
On that note,
yeah, on that note, yeah. So I'm just going to thank everybody who came into the chat tonight. Thank you, everybody from the UK, around the world who's tuned in. Great questions tonight and a thoroughly fascinating guest. I'll leave the last words for you guys to say good night.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And Tim Brennan, Beast, Skyflower, Blue Shift. I can only see a portion of people who are there. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you very much. And most of all, Craig, stepping in last minute.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great, and thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and thank you for all the really great questions as well. They were good.
Great.
Fantastic.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Good night, everybody. Good night.